The courtroom walls didn't shake when she walked in, but something colder than silence followed her. A whisper of war, stitched into civilian clothes, and no rank, no medals, no welcome, only a voice too soft for a room built to ignore her. She sat alone on the last bench, hands folded over a worn leather notebook. No badge, no uniform, no nameplate, just stillness. The kind of stillness people ignore until it demands to be heard. The military courtroom was sharp with order, polished boots, clean cuts. The flag stood taller than the people. A trial was underway. Loud voices, projections, and blame flying like bullets aimed at a single man, Major Raymond Caston, accused of negligence, of abandoning men, of failing the mission. Thalia didn't flinch when they said abandonment. Her eyes stayed fixed on the man they all pointed at, but no one noticed her. That was the plan. The prosecutor, young, ambitious, hungry, painted Caston as a man who froze in the line of duty. Tactical maps flashed behind him. Each red marked a scar. 5 soldiers died because he hesitated, he shouted, because he aborted extraction. Caston sat stiff in his chair. He looked like a monument, carved by guilt, held together by silence. No one defended him out loud. His lawyer barely looked up. The case felt closed before it began. And still, Thalia watched. She wrote nothing, just waited. Then the judge's voice rang out, sharp as steel. Next witness. Civilian intelligence analyst. Thalia Marr. A few heads turned. Most didn't. Just another forgettable contractor. They assumed. Maybe a pencil pusher. Maybe someone who saw things from far away. Not someone who bled in the dirt they were arguing over. She walked slowly to the front, not timid, just exact. Her blouse was plain, her blazer navy, her hair pulled back in a knot that said nothing. She took the oath without a flicker of emotion. The room expected nothing from her. Please state your role, the judge ordered. Intelligence analysis, pre-mission recon, Operation Emberfall. Her voice was clear, but quiet. Too quiet. Speak up, the judge said, already annoyed. A few snickers echoed from the back. The prosecutor resumed, trying to wring drama from her calm answers. She listed terrain issues, conflicting militia reports, red flags, and the satellite data. Every word with precision, but her voice barely reached the microphone. The court reporter leaned in. The judge's lips tightened. The lawyer rolled his eyes. Please, Ms. Marr, he mocked. The court isn't classified. You're allowed to speak like a human. Thalia simply blinked. The defense pounced next. What field experience do you have? I serve on classified operations, she said. Laughter stirred. How convenient, the lawyer smirked. No proof, no stripes, no relevance. Even the judge began to lose interest. Thalia looked down for the first time, not in defeat, but in calculation, as if choosing the exact moment to breathe. She glanced toward the gallery. One older man, silver hair, rows of medals, was staring at her now, frowning, trying to place her face. Something haunted flickered in his expression. Recognition. But from what? The lawyer pressed harder. If your intel was so strong, why did 5 soldiers die? Thalia said nothing. The judge banged her gavel once. Answer the question. I submitted warnings, Thalia said calmly. They were not included in the final brief. Do you have proof? Not yet. Another chuckle. Another eye roll. Another tiny victory for ignorance. Thalia looked at the photo the defense held up, a bombed-out structure in desert shadow. For a moment, her fingers clenched around the notebook. Then they relaxed again. You seem detached, Ms. Marr, the lawyer said. Thalia stared at him and replied, I buried emotion when I buried my team. The courtroom froze for just a beat, but the moment passed. Dismissal returned like a fog. The judge leaned forward. Ms. Marr, if you cannot speak clearly, we will dismiss your testimony. Thalia nodded, understood. She returned to silence, but her eyes had changed. Something beneath them began to glow. Not grief, not fear, but timing, because ghosts don't speak until they choose to, and she had waited exactly 3 years for this. She stood under the fluorescent lights like a shadow pulled forward from history. The courtroom wasn't listening yet, but it was beginning to watching her, studying her, questioning why this quiet civilian had become so immovable. "Tell us again, Ms. Marr," the prosecutor asked. "What exactly did your intelligence report include?" Thalia's voice stayed level. "Topographical data, satellite reconnaissance, human intel, discrepancies in local militia movement, unusual radio patterns near the extraction zone. And your conclusion? The mission was compromised before it began." Gasps didn't come, but a few pens paused in mid-scribble. The judge exhaled audibly. "Please speak up." Thalia nodded once, then continued, just as softly. "I submitted a full risk escalation memo. It was ignored or removed." Major Caston, the accused, finally looked at her. His eyes were hollow, but something behind them stirred. Recognition? Hope? Guilt? Across the gallery, the silver-haired veteran, Colonel Varon, leaned forward. His jaw tightened. He hadn't taken his eyes off her since she'd said classified. "Ms. Marr," the defense cut in, "you're not being clear. What proof do you have that anyone removed your warning?" "I don't. Not yet. But I do have something else." She reached into her bag, slowly, methodically, and placed an object on the witness table. A tactical notebook, worn, torn at the spine. Its edges curled like it had been carried through fire. The room inhaled, but no one spoke. "That's not part of the record," the defense snapped. "It is now," Thalia replied. The judge narrowed her eyes. "What is that, Ms. Marr?" "A field log. My own. Operation Emberfall. Not the version in your files. The one we actually followed." The defense laughed. "This is absurd. You're claiming to have been there? That you're not just a desk analyst?" Thalia didn't flinch. "Yes." Silence. The judge adjusted in her seat. "You're saying you were physically part of the mission?" "I was extraction lead." Louder silence this time. The kind that scrapes chairs across marble and halts breath in the gallery. "That mission survivors were declared Kia." The prosecutor said quietly. "There were no survivors." "There was one," Thalia answered. The lights above her flickered once and steadied. "I was pulled from the rubble by a local. Hidden. Forgotten. Buried alive in the paperwork of lies." The judge leaned back. Her gavel hand twitched. The courtroom began to shift. Postures changed. Uniforms stiffened. A few officers exchanged long, uneasy looks. "Why are you coming forward now?" the prosecutor asked. "Because now you're about to destroy the wrong man. Again. And I won't let it happen." Major Caston closed his eyes. He whispered something to himself no one else could hear. The defense attorney paced furiously. "This is unverified hearsay from a so-called ghost. She expects us to believe. She expects us to listen." Colonel Varon interrupted from the gallery. The judge turned toward him. "Colonel, you're out of order." "I trained that voice," he said. "I trained her. I watched her team deploy. I gave the final salute." Thalia finally looked at him. Her eyes didn't soften. They confirmed everything. She was a commander, Varon said. And if she says she led that mission, then someone's lied to all of us. The judge's face remained hard, but a crack had formed, invisible, deep, and spreading. Thalia picked up the notebook and opened it to the first page. Bloodstains, hand-drawn maps, emergency codes, all in her handwriting. The air grew still, like the room had stepped back in time. "They didn't just forget us," she said softly. "They erased us." And somewhere behind her, a door that had been sealed for 3 years creaked open. The shift begins. The courtroom certainty begins to crumble. Thalia takes her first step into visible truth. The notebook's pages turn like a wind chime in a storm. Soft, steady, but impossible to ignore. Each line carried more than ink. It carried absence. The kind that rattles you before you understand why. Thalia didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The courtroom was now bending toward her, not out of respect, but confusion and fear. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said slowly, "if what she's claiming is true, then everything about Operation Emberfall has been altered." The judge gave no answer. She stared at the notebook in Thalia's hands like it might explode. Major Caston was barely breathing. He kept blinking as if trying to erase what he was seeing. The defense wasn't done yet. Commander or not, this doesn't explain the intel failure. The photographs, the blown building, the silence on the radios. Thalia raised her eyes. Because our comms were jammed. Deliberately. By whom? I don't know. But you suspect someone. Her fingers tightened. I know the order to abort came. And I know Caston tried to confirm it 3 times. Caston's head snapped up. The courtroom turned sharply. Thalia continued. Your Honor, with permission, I'd like to read from my field transcript. The judge hesitated. Proceed. She flipped to a specific page, dog-eared, trembling. Time-stamped 1742. Comm link partially restored. Receive fragmented message from command. Abort mission. Repeat. Abort. No reason given. Requesting confirmation. She paused. That message was sent by Major Caston. Gasps this time. No one hid them. In reply, the judge asked. There was none. Silence crashed again. A deeper kind. The kind that tastes like metal. Colonel Varon stood from the gallery. Commander Marr, did the team survive that order? Thalia swallowed. For a time. We were alive when the order came. Alive when it was ignored. Alive when the building was hit. The prosecutor leaned in. And you? I was in the comms room. Staff Sergeant Rios was with me. He decoded the final signal. He said, They're not coming, are they? Then he pushed me behind a console before the wall came down. And the rest of the team? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled out a folded photograph. 8 soldiers. A desert backdrop. Faces full of sweat and laughter. Thalia tapped each one as she named them. Farron, Vega, Lynn, Rios, Helms. The best we had. Her voice cracked but didn't break. The defense tried again. You expect us to believe this, and yet you remained silent for 3 years? I wasn't silent, Thalia replied. I was gathering what couldn't be silenced. The judge finally broke. Why come forward now? Because Caston is the last domino. If he falls, the truth goes with him. Colonel Varon stepped closer. Your Honor, may I speak again? Briefly. I trained Phantom Ember. If Thalia Marr says this happened, I believe her. And I've seen enough war to know when someone is telling the truth and when they're telling it too late. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Thalia turned the page. Here are the GPS coordinates of the warehouse we found before the explosion. We traced shipments of advanced weapons. Serial numbers linked to black market chains. One name came up repeatedly. She paused, then said it. Brigadier General Hadler. The room rippled. Faces turned pale. No one laughed now. He ordered the abort, she continued. He sealed our fate. And now he's promoted. Untouched. Clean. The prosecutor whispered, You have proof? Enough to burn a flag if I wanted to. But that's not the mission. The judge looked rattled. Her hands clenched around the gavel. Major Caston finally spoke. I requested confirmation 3 times, he said quietly. I never believed that order, but I followed it. I thought they were already dead. Thalia looked at him. You weren't wrong to doubt. You were just too alone. The weight in the room became unbearable. Someone had buried the truth, but it was resurfacing, breath by breath, page by page. And the worst part was still to come. The truth deepens. Fear begins to shift. And Thalia's voice becomes undeniable. The notebook trembled slightly in her hands now, not from fear, but weight. Not paper, not ink, but blood, memory, and betrayal still unpunished. The judge stared down at her. You're saying Brigadier General Hadler orchestrated a cover-up? Thalia's answer didn't rise in volume, but it rose in force. Yes, and I'm the last piece of it. Major Caston sat with his head lowered, a man halfway between collapse and awakening. I followed the order, he whispered. I sent the abort signal. And we received it, Thalia replied, just before the roof came down. The courtroom was no longer a courtroom. It had become a graveyard. Each face looked like a headstone waiting to be carved. The prosecutor stepped forward, voice tighter than before. "Do you have any physical evidence?" Thalia nodded. "I do." She unzipped the lining of her blazer. From inside, she pulled a sealed microfilm capsule, matte black, cold-looking, military-issued. It made a sharp clink against the wooden rail as she set it down. "This contains intercepted transmissions, weapon serial logs, black site coordinates, and the original abort order." The judge didn't move. Thalia wasn't done. She pulled out 2 more documents, folded, laminated, fingerprint tagged. One is the original mission authorization. The other is the abort directive. Both were signed by the same command chain. She handed them to the bailiff. "Your Honor," she said softly, "compare the signatures." Colonel Varon, still standing, leaned forward. The judge opened both documents. The courtroom's air seemed to vanish. Her eyes darted back and forth. Not once, not twice, but again. Slowly, her hands started to shake. "This signature," she muttered. "This is mine." "And the other?" Thalia asked. The judge's jaw clenched. "It appears to be mine, but it's not." No one breathed. "I never signed the abort order," she whispered. "They forged it." The silence cracked. Several officers exchanged horrified glances. One man stood involuntarily and had to be ordered to sit. Thalia stepped down from the witness box. She didn't ask permission. She didn't need to. She turned toward the gallery, her voice steady, her hands loose. "For 3 years you thought I was dead, but death isn't the same as silence. Some of us live to speak. Others live to bury the truth." She faced Caston. "You didn't kill us. You were a pawn. So was the judge. So were the intel handlers." "Then who?" Caston asked. "Hitler and those who profited. Contractors, arms dealers, ghosts in the system. I traced every file, every dollar." The courtroom doors suddenly opened. A team of military police entered, followed by a man in full uniform. "Colonel Blackwell?" he asked. The judge stood, her voice breaking slightly. "Yes. I'm Brigadier General Royce Foster, Inspector General's office. We received an anonymous drop box yesterday containing classified evidence and a list of names." He turned toward Thalia. "You must be Commander Marr." "I am." "We're here to take custody of this evidence and begin immediate investigation." Before the judge could respond, Thalia raised one finger. "I'm not finished." The room stilled again. Thalia turned to the families, seated quietly in the back, faces she'd memorized from photographs in her bunk. She pulled a dog tag from her pocket. "Sergeant Rios," she said softly, "died shielding me. His last act was saving a voice. This one." She handed the tag to a woman whose hands shook as she took it. "Colonel Blackwell slowly Saturday. How many others knew?" "Enough to cover their tracks," Thalia said, "but not enough to erase us." Caston stood now, broken open. "I want to testify." Thalia shook her head gently. "Not yet. They'll come for you now. But this time, you won't be alone." The microfilm sat like a bomb waiting for ignition. The judge looked at it, then at Thalia. "You carried this alone?" "Yes." "For how long?" "Since the day my team was left to die." The judge whispered, "I've lived with guilt I didn't earn." Thalia nodded. "Then you understand why I couldn't stay silent anymore." Outside, thunder cracked over the base. Inside, the truth had already landed, and the system, once untouched, had just been breached. The system cracks. The guilty are named. And Thalia's voice burns through years of silence. The judge didn't touch the gavel. Not this time. It lay beside her hand like a weapon she no longer trusted. General Foster moved toward the front. "Commander Marr, your evidence will trigger a full military inquiry." Thalia didn't blink. "It's not just evidence. It's names, dates, decisions made in the dark, while good people were bleeding in the dust." Colonel Varon stepped closer to her now, not as a superior, but as something quieter, a man carrying too many ghosts. "I attended your memorial," he said softly. "I delivered your eulogy. We folded your flag. I read it. Thalia whispered. "Thank you for what you said about honor. I came back to protect it." Behind them, Caston was still standing, fists clenched at his sides, his uniform suddenly feeling too tight. "What happens to me now?" "You'll be reviewed," General Foster replied. "In light of this evidence, you may be cleared entirely." Caston turned to Thalia. "Why would you help me?" "I followed the order. I left your team behind." She looked straight into him. "Because you asked for confirmation 3 times. Because doubt is what separates the soldiers from the cowards." He swallowed, eyes damp. "I heard your voice on the comm just before the signal died." "I heard yours too," she said. "And I knew you didn't believe what they told you." A hush fell again. This one felt different, less fear, more weight, like the first breath after a funeral. From her bag, Thalia pulled out a waterproof case. She placed it carefully on the table. Every transmission, every field log, each step we took before the silence. "It's all here." Foster nodded. "We'll take custody of it immediately." "No," she said. "Not yet." She turned to the back of the courtroom, to the small group of civilians sitting still, unsure why they had come or why they were suddenly shaking. "I want them to see first." She walked toward them, slowly, like returning to a battlefield where no bodies had ever been recovered, to the woman clutching a folded flag. She handed a compass. Sergeant Lynn carried this. He used to say it would always point him back to his son, to a graying man in a faded uniform. She handed dog tags and a med patch. "Lieutenant Farron." She patched me up before the building came down. Her hands were shaking, but she still saved me. To a young man with his brother's eyes, she gave a crumpled photograph. 8 people, dusty smiles, the living before the lie. She decoded the comms. He jammed the interceptors. She hid me beneath shattered concrete. One by one, she gave them something real, something not written in the mission report. "These were your people. This is how they died. Not in negligence, not forgotten, but fighting, transmitting, resisting until the very end." Tears didn't break. They arrived quietly, respectfully, some with breath, some with hands over mouths. The judge stood now, her voice softer than ever before. "We will amend their records. Their deaths will no longer be listed as procedural failures." "They were betrayed," Thalia said, "not failed." The courtroom nodded, as if the truth had weight enough to pull everyone into the same motion. Colonel Varron raised a trembling salute. Others followed, slowly at first, then all at once. Even Caston stood straight, his hand rising to his brow, eyes locked on the woman who was once a ghost. No applause, no anthem, just silence, finally filled with meaning. And at its center stood Thalia, no longer quiet, no longer erased. Justice takes root. Thalia restores names, faces, and meaning. The courtroom stands not for law, but for truth. The courtroom had emptied, but its air still carried the weight of the confession. A confession not shouted, but whispered and believed. Outside, the sun leaned low on the horizon, painting long gold shadows across the concrete. The last salute still hung in the air, like a hymn without music. Thalia stood alone by the steps, her notebook pressed to her side. No longer a civilian, no longer invisible, but not quite whole either. Beside her, General Foster gave quiet instructions into a secured line. "Seal the evidence. Move her under full protection. Initiate the tribunal logs." Behind him, Colonel Blackwell approached, her uniform jacket removed, sleeves rolled, dignity intact but bruised. "I spent 3 years believing I condemned your team," she said softly. "A forged signature and silence. That's all it took to bury the truth." Thalia didn't answer right away. She watched a group of families being guided toward waiting transport vehicles. Some walked in silence. Others clutched dog tags, worn compasses, weathered photographs. "The truth was never buried," Thalia finally said. "It just needed someone who remembered where it fell." Blackwell exhaled. "The Pentagon wants to debrief you. I expected that. They'll try to shape your story. Sand off the edges." Thalia turned, her eyes steady and unblinking. "Let them try." Colonel Varron stepped forward next, His voice cracked beneath decades of service. What you did, surviving, gathering, waiting, that wasn't duty. That was something deeper. She gave a small nod. You taught us protocol. But the rest? That came from knowing who we were fighting for. From behind them, Caston emerged, his posture more grounded now. Lighter, not from joy, but from release. I don't expect forgiveness, he said, but I needed to hear you say it. I already did, Thalia replied. Back when you asked for confirmation, that was your soul speaking. I never forgot your voice. The wind picked up gently. The flag over the base rustled. Not loudly, but enough to draw everyone's attention upward. Foster rejoined them. We detained Hadeler. He was caught trying to leave the country an hour ago. Thalia's jaw didn't tighten. She didn't smile. Justice doesn't start with handcuffs, she said. It starts when truth is believed by someone other than the one carrying it. He nodded slowly. There will be hearings, investigations, maybe trials. She looked toward the courthouse doors one last time. As long as the names are cleared, as long as the families know it's enough. Foster gestured to a waiting vehicle. Your transport is ready. She moved forward, but stopped before stepping in. From her bag, she pulled one final object, a folded letter. The ink blurred, the edges brittle. She handed it to Colonel Blackwell. What is it? The original field directive. Sign with your real signature, not the one they use. Damn you. Blackwell stared at the paper as if it carried her breath. You held on to this all this time? You deserve the truth, too. The colonel's voice dropped. I don't think I'll ever forgive myself. Thalia turned toward her, then lived differently. That's what my team would have wanted. The families were almost gone now. Only one remained, a mother holding a compass in both hands. She looked up as Thalia passed. He always found his way home, the woman said. Thalia paused, then answered gently. And this time, so did the truth. As she stepped in the vehicle, the door closed with a soft thud, not an ending, but a seal. The engine hummed. The wheels turned. The base fell behind her like a chapter finally allowed to end. From the back seat, Thalia looked at her reflection in the tinted glass. Not the face they buried, not the voice they dismissed, but the woman who rose from the silence and made the world listen. Some truths don't need to shout. They just need to survive long enough to be heard.